whatever consciousness it is that makes this experience that we're having possible. There's no evidence that it isn't anything other than eternal. Everything in existence, whether we have the languages of math to describe them or not, everything in existence can be described in terms of math. And those qualities of math are almost the same qualities of God. They're eternal. They're everywhere. It's inescapable. Math is everything. And one of those qualities of math is infinity. And what that means is that if that's true, then whatever you are, you can't be separated from that. Got a lot of religious people who, that's kind of their bread and butter, is they're trying to warn you that you can be eternally separated from God. And if they believe that, I guess their their mission is valid. I haven't seen any evidence for it. I've done a lot of exploring in my mind, worked with a lot of people, talked to a lot of people, and I haven't found within my own consciousness or anybody else give me any kind of good reason that says that God needs anything and that it's possible that you could be separated from God. But here's the thing. I think it's possible for us to play this game of being human where we can be afraid that we're separated from God.
My guest today is Demian Gover. Demian is the Chief Minister for Peaceful Mountain Way Church of Metaphysics. He has been studying spirituality for over 30 years. His formal education is in psychology, philosophy, comparative religion, and metaphysical science. His undergraduate work in psychology began in 1993 at Eastern Kentucky University, and he has received an additional seminary degree in metaphysical science, which he began in 2012, granting him ordination as a certified metaphysical practitioner under his International Metaphysical Ministry. He is currently pursuing his doctorate degree in Pastoral Counseling Psychology from the University of Sedona. Demian, thank you so much for being my guest today. I appreciate you and your time.
Well, thank you, Tia. It's great to see you again. It's been a while. My mission is to help people understand some of the things that I've come to understand in their own way and in their own time. I don't think that's the important part, but we're all seeking answers to questions that we have. Life is hard, and there's a lot of pain and confusion involved in being alive as a human on Earth. And we've come up with all kinds of philosophies and religions and sciences and just ways of thinking about just trying to make sense of the world we live in and trying to make sense of our own lives. And so there's questions that we might have about the things that we carry around with us from our early childhood, things that we might not even remember or really be able to comprehend from that early time in our lives. And then there's existential questions that we might have that we might not really have the words to, but it's still that yearning to be, we're asking, where did we come from? Where are we going? What are we supposed to be doing in the meantime? All of those questions. And I think it's a really useful question to ask, what's the relationship or maybe the difference in the relationship between what I am and who I am. So there's there's the local who I am, my ego, and that's everything that I think about my history and my qualities as a person. But then there's where that came from, and what is it that made that possible? What is it that makes this story that I'm experiencing possible? What is that? And in English, we call that God. Um, you know, Histories and cultures and people we've given all kinds of different names, but we seem to distill the the Almighty, the Creator, down to just a handful of qualities. Um, and those are omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. God is everywhere. God is everything. God is all knowing. God is all powerful. God is all knowing and all loving. And those are the qualities of God. And then people ask about, well, what does God want? Well, that's an agenda. I don't think that question makes a lot of sense. What does God want? Well, how could God need anything? I think asking that question, asking, well, how did God get there? Well, that's, to me, asking that question is kind of like asking, well, how did infinity get there? It just is. It's just math. It just, we can argue about the languages of math till we're blue in the face, but we can't argue that there's something that exists that is perfect and measurable and except to the level of infinity. I really wanted to understand what it is that we're working with. Um, the what I am, that's eternal. Whatever mind, whatever consciousness it is that makes this experience that we're having possible. There's no evidence that it isn't anything other than eternal. Everything in existence, whether we have the languages of math to describe them or not, everything in existence can be described in terms of math. And those qualities of math are almost the same qualities of God. They're eternal. They're everywhere. It's inescapable. Math is everything, and one of those qualities of math is infinity. And what that means is that if that's true, then whatever you are, you can't be separated from that. Got a lot of religious people who, that's kind of their bread and butter, is they're trying to warn you that you can be eternally separated from God. And if they believe that, I guess their their mission is valid. I haven't seen any evidence for it. I've done a lot of exploring in my mind, worked with a lot of people, talked to a lot of people, and I haven't found within my own consciousness or anybody else give me any kind of good reason that says that God needs anything and that it's possible that you could be separated from God. But here's the thing. I think it's possible for us to play this game of being human where we can be afraid that we're separated from God. I think that's really, that's as far as playing the game where we don't know everything that we're working with. And it's really easy to believe that. And that's that's the old story, isn't it? About the serpent in the garden. In the beginning, we walked with God, we talked with God, we were tight. But then the serpent, which represents the ego, that's your human ego, because the serpent is more subtle than the other beasts in the field. You can't see your own ego. You can only see the expression of it. You can only have that sense of separation and that sense of identity, but you can't see it as the separate thing, as the untruth that it is. And so, of course, the ego first convinces the subconscious that you're separate. And that's the first lie, because the devil's a liar. The first lie is that you're separate. And of course, the implication is that if you're separate from other people and other things, the implication is you're also separate from God, which can't be true. Which can't be possible. But that's the first belief, that we're separate from everything. Your mind is an island unto itself, and you don't have access to the minds of others, and others don't have access to your mind until you kind of do. And then you start questioning that whole separation thing. And if you have experiences where you see glimpses of your past and glimpses of your future and maybe glimpses of other people's pasts and other people's futures, and You might have experiences where you feel more connected to things than you thought was possible. And then you start questioning that whole separation idea. And I've had many experiences in meditation and with psychedelics, especially with ayahuasca and other um, sacraments like with psilocybin and the bufo toad medicine, that showed me that this is a world without end, and there's really nothing to fear. You know, of course, we're carrying around with us all of these vestiges from our past where we have unresolved emotional issues. And so imagine, an infant, you're a newborn, you're a toddler, you're a young child, and you have no frame of reference, and you have no language to describe these overwhelmingly emotional experiences, and these things that you're going through in life at that time that are incomprehensible. Now, of course, as adults, we can look back and we can see exactly what's going on, and we can even understand things like, that the emotions aren't the enemy. The emotions are the thing that we use to process experience. But when we're that young, what else could we do than parts of ourselves see those emotions as a threat? We don't have a reference to physical danger, physical bodily harm. All babies know is how they feel. They don't understand, what a cut and bruise is. They don't understand what a fractured bone is. They're operating from a level of that things that are dangerous are things like rage and sorrow and terror and shame. These are the dangers. These things are the threats. And of course, at that age, you don't even have any language to describe that, much less reject it. And what we've learned about humans is that until we're around the age of between 7 and 12 years old, we don't have the ability to consciously self-reflect. And by the time we have that, we naturally develop that ability. We're just born into a theta wave brain state. So when we're that young, we're soaking in our environment like a sponge, and we're just spitting it right back out. And we don't have the ability to we don't have the ability to do any reprogramming. As adults, we have that ability. We have the ability to reprogram ourselves, to reprogram our subconscious. But just because we naturally develop that ability doesn't mean we know how. And so here we are going through life, and we don't realize part of what we're actually doing is we're trying to recreate those dramatic experiences so that we can work out those emotional issues. Because we have emotional needs. And if we don't have those emotional needs met, we can't be healthy. And so as adults, we can satisfy all of those emotional needs ourselves. But just because we have that ability, like I said, doesn't mean that we have the knowledge or the skill or even recognize the opportunities to do that reprogramming. Because what's actually required would be a radically, radically different approach to self-talk, to where we were talking to ourselves in a way that actually begins to fulfill those emotional needs that we may have had denied to us in the first place. Because those false beliefs that we internalized when we were very young, when we weren't having our needs met, those beliefs and the emotions that come with them, it colors and motivates everything about the way we live our daily lives. And one of the things that makes sense to me, I don't know if this speaks to everybody, don't know if this works for everybody, but I've described this to many people in this way, and it seems to make sense. Um, of course, all of these things are happening at the same time, but we're having an experience of life, and we get everything mixed up when we don't understand how to separate what's going on in our head. Lately, in the past, several decades, culturally, we've taken to using a lot of feeling language. Like, I feel like these people don't want me here, or I feel like I need to leave. Those aren't emotions. Those aren't feelings. Those are beliefs. And I think it's a really important distinction. Um, but when you say it out loud like that, those are just our consciously acknowledged beliefs, and those types of beliefs don't actually have as much influence on the way we live our lives as we would like. In fact, most people go through life kind of frustrated, and frequently disappointed because their behaviors don't match their preferred values. So people are going around saying, "Oh, I believe in this, I believe in that. I believe in God, I believe in Buddha, I believe in Jesus, I believe in science, I believe in whatever." And then you look at their behavior, and it becomes obvious real quick that they don't actually believe what they say they believe. What's motivating them is a set of subconsciously internalized beliefs that they might not even be aware of. And this is kind of what all humans are dealing with to a greater or lesser degree.
Demian, you are the chief minister of Peaceful Mountain Way, Church of Metaphysics. And you're located there here in the States in Kentucky, correct?
Yeah, yeah, we're in central Kentucky. We're right in between Richmond and Berea, Kentucky.
You conduct ayahuasca ceremonies there at your church. Do you feel as if you were able to gain some wisdom about humanity and what we are and what happens at death, or anything about death? Were you able to gain wisdom through the help of ayahuasca?
Well, gosh, that's a heavy question, especially when you put, "Did you gain wisdom?" Because, I always have to, try to check my ego there. Did I learn anything or not? You know, if I said I did, you'd think I was probably bragging, but if I said I didn't, you'd probably know I was lying. I didn't get the words, mostly from ayahuasca. That came from study and research, and it took a while to put the words together to describe what I've seen. But yeah, my explorations in my own mind and my own consciousness. Um, it's easy to misinterpret because I think some things come up just to challenge you. Some ideas come up just to, not because there's something in your mind saying this is the way things are, this is the truth. It's almost more like, this is what you used to believe, do you still believe that? And of course, it's not going to come out and say it in so many words, but I've realized that does seem to be one of the ways that things are presented to us during ayahuasca ceremony, is things that are sometimes things that are very pleasant come up. It's kind of one of the things, we joke and say, it's not all unicorns and rainbows, because sometimes it is. It's not that everything is, a difficult, struggle with trauma. Um, but it's also a mistake to think that, all of the stories that people have heard about ayahuasca, and where certainly I've had many experiences, where everything was just bliss and no separation. Everything was together. Everything was one. And those experiences let us know closer to the truth and reality of what we're working with. And it shows us that all the story that we're working with, it's an illusion. It's a temporary illusion. And but it has to be convincing. It can't be it can't be an illusion that is easy to see through. It has to be convincing. Otherwise, you wouldn't take it serious.
For my viewers that aren't familiar with ayahuasca, can you tell us what ayahuasca is?
So if anybody's ever seen a TV show or a movie with depictions of, what you might call trippy, if it's, a movie about that has something about magic mushrooms or LSD or Indians doing, Kevin Costner doing peyote in the, in the fields, um, or even some of the modern um, Marvel comic movies. There's some really interesting depictions of altered states of consciousness, and that's what these substances and these what we call sacraments are. They're psychedelics. Um, they're hallucinogenic substances, and what they do is they temporarily disconnect the neurosynaptic bridges that lead to our extreme emotional responses, our sense of identity, and even our sometimes our consistent sense of reality. And what that does is allows other parts of our brain to make connections that it might not normally make. And so we get to see essentially ourselves from a very different point of view, and a different point of view practically every time. Um, I think you will probably hear people say more often that they have similar experiences with LSD or similar experiences with psilocybin every time. That's not always, you know, true, but you might hear people say things like that. You will very rarely hear people say, "Yeah, I've done 200 journeys with ayahuasca and it was exactly the same every single time." You're not going to hear anybody say that. Partially because you're a different person every time you approach the sacrament. And what it can show you is different aspects of the self from a very different point of view. And you can see things that you can absolutely imagine are very much outside of yourself. But then you have to ask yourself, well, how do I know this? How am I experiencing this? Well, ultimately, I'm experiencing it through my mind. I'm not experiencing it with my cells. I'm not experiencing it with my brain. That's just a manifestation of this story playing out. But what I see can be everything inside, outside, everything in heaven and hell and in between and beyond. And at different times, you may see things that remind you of your personal past. You may see things that speak more to existential questions. It's a gross overgeneralization, and people will argue me with this, but generally speaking, over time, psilocybin tends to deal with, I think, more intellectual issues, and ayahuasca tends to deal more with emotional issues. Like I said, that's an overgeneralization. Sometimes it's exactly the opposite. Um, but generally speaking, that seems to be why there's the potential for the greater depth of healing with ayahuasca, because it challenges your perceptions and your beliefs about your emotions. And it gives you the opportunity to change your mind about things that you might have previously believed. And since you mentioned the word wisdom, I used to think that wisdom, because I've heard somebody define wisdom as applied knowledge. I think you can have knowledge about all kinds of stuff that's just wrong. I think, and I think you can act on knowledge that's just you know doesn't work. So what I think of as knowledge as being an additive process. You pick up new information, you pick up new skills, whereas wisdom is a subtractive process. When you look at somebody who says, "Oh, that person's wise," why? Why do you say that? Well, because they don't do things the way other people do them. Oh, so it's like they used to believe things the way other people believe them, and now they don't. So that's to me, wisdom is when you recognize, oh, I used to believe this thing. This used to be one of the principles that I lived my life by, and now I realize that does not work, and I'm going to do things a different way. To me, that's what wisdom is.
And that's kind of what ayahuasca can open up inside of you is a greater knowing that leads to wisdom and changing. Like you said, you're a different person every time that you do ayahuasca. And is that because ayahuasca changes us?
It's really difficult not to. You can't have experiences and it not affect you. It's not going to do the same thing for every person. It's not going to be helpful for every person in uh, in every circumstance. Um, but it's not going to affect everyone the same way. There's no such thing as a typical ayahuasca journey. When we try to prepare people for their experiences, for their direct experiences with their inner consciousness in this way. We do want to talk about some of the potential for some of the more extreme experiences that may be particularly visceral and difficult to handle, physically, or some of the things that might be particularly scary and emotionally and sensorily overwhelming. And so ayahuasca can turn off your senses. Ayahuasca can amplify your senses. Um, People used to joke about who was it that said in the '60s they should put acid in the uh, water to stop all the politicians from being sociopaths. But the problem is that in the short term, psychedelics can actually amplify the ego and can strengthen that sense of separation, which is really weird because people will describe their experiences of oneness, and then certain types of personalities can turn right around and say, "But I'm the only one who knows that." um, and so yeah, no, it'd probably be a bad idea to introduce psychedelics into the general population that we do believe that it's best for people to, especially early on, to be guided in their psychedelic experiences. Not told what to see, but um, what we try to do is we try to provide a new language to describe phenomena and to define our terms. Because English is just, it's one of those languages where there's a dozen meanings for every word. And so, especially when we're talking about deep stuff, we're talking about, philosophical or theological ideas. And, people use words like church and God and soul and spirit. And everybody's using those same words, but everyone's using them in very different ways. So I've just stopped debating with people entirely because I realize that, you're half hour into a conversation and you realize you're using words differently. So you'd have to start all over again and just stop the argument just to define your terms. And then you get to argue over that.
I think that happens a lot in the spiritual community over the word death. Um, what death means to me might be something different than what death means to someone else. And when I say death, I mean be all end all, right? The end of existence.
Oh,
And that
our
doesn't exist.
yeah, our culture treats death. It's final.
Hmm.
It's over, not coming back. Um, and then of course, we have all kinds of modalities that refer to death as a transformation, because there can be no finality. It's first law of thermodynamics, right? Nothing can be created or destroyed. It can only change form. And that seems to be what experience does. It just changes form. I mentioned before we started recording, um, both of my folks have passed away in the past year, um, fairly recently, actually. It's been kind of rough. And I was saying, if it hadn't been for the career path that I've chosen and the tools that I have and the support that I'm surrounded by, I'd be having a rough go at it right now. But one of the things that I've understood very, very deeply is that when very often when we say we love, and we've got family members who have problems, and so we worry about them and we struggle, and what I've realized, there's a lot of tension involved in, because to invite relationships and families to invite chaos in your life, and so there's a lot of stress involved. And so I think what accidentally ends up happening is when we say, you know I love someone, um what we're interpreting as love is really the fear of loss. Love should cause a relaxation response when you're expressing, um, the connection of love. It should cause you to relax. If tension is there, that's evidence of anxiety. And so if there's tension there, that's evidence of the fear of loss. It doesn't mean the love's not there, because they're not mutually exclusive. It's not like it's either or. The love very much, very well may be there, but there's something that's preventing that relaxation, and enjoying the connection, and that's the fear of loss.
Do you think that is the biggest problem with death is the fear of loss?
If we're alive, we have no place to talk about death because none of us have tasted it. What we've experienced is loss. We've had people around us die. We haven't seen death, we've seen loss. And so, of course, we confuse them, and we end up thinking they're the same thing. And so, when it comes to our turning and looking at our own mortality, well, we can't help but equate our thinking about our death with our experience of what we call death, which is really loss. We've seen other people die. We've seen people whom we love and whom we're attached to die. But we have no idea what they're experiencing. Some people may have, better guesses, um, than others, but really, unless you've died for longer than a half hour, um, it's really hard to say. And I'm not discounting, people's, death experiences. I think there's a lot there that people have, a glimpse of something beyond their physical existence, and those experiences that we've had with psychedelics like ayahuasca, um, I think it presents ideas that really challenge the possibility of finality. How is it possible? We have, when the floor melts out from under you, and all of and everything becomes distorted inside and outside your mind, if that even means anything. Okay, how is there something inside and outside your mind? How is it that we're thinking internally, but then we see that bottle of water across the room and we say, that's outside myself. How do you know? How are you interpreting any of that except through your mind? So how do you know that anything exists other than your mind? And if your mind is an expression of whatever causes existence, how would it be possible to be separate from that? An experience might end, but the consciousness that is doing the experiencing, where's it going to go? How could it possibly die? And so if that's true, then if everything comes from one consciousness, if everything comes from one place, then that means that you belong to that one place. You are that one place. For all purposes, your localized, limited human mind is the eternal consciousness of God. And some people know this, but some people live it. And Yeshua, the Christ, and we've got scriptures that say, I and my Father are one, and you and I are one. You see where I'm going with this, where the math is hanging up, is that you can't be separated from the eternal consciousness that makes your human drama possible. But in the meantime, you can be afraid of it. And that's one of the games that we're playing.
Isn't that what hell is the illusion of the separation from God?
How could you describe hell in any other way than separation from God? Now, if you define hell as an eternal experience, not as an eternal state, but an eternal experience, then that would mean that you would have to define hell as the eternal separation from God, not just separation from God, but eternal separation from God, and that I don't think is possible. I have a strong, strong conviction that that's just the most it's absurd, absolutely absurd. It's like saying that it would be possible to take numbers out of the number line and chuck them out, and that they would be gone forever. That just it doesn't make any sense. How would it be possible that the consciousness that is God could create something and it not be out of Himself? How would it be possible for God to create something that isn't God? But it is an experience that has the ability to imagine all kinds of things, and especially from that point of view of separation. And that's kind of seems how all humans get started, and that's the original sin. It's not like you did something wrong and you deserve to be punished for it. It's just that you're born not knowing how math works. That's and so there's all these different words, of sin, wicked, evil, in like in Old Testament scriptures, and the one that's the word that's most commonly used for that we translate into the English word sin is missing the mark. You got the math wrong. And all of these, the words like evil and wicked, they translate to go against God, which sounds like like we're like it's a conscious battle. No, again, it's just getting the math wrong. You grew up in a culture that convinced you that 2 plus 2 equaled 5. It never worked. You struggled around in pain and confusion and disappointment, But your culture kept telling you 2 + 2 = 5. So you kept plugging away, trying to insist that, and it was never going to work. That math was never ever going to add up. And so when we've done things so long that that were never going to work, if we want to change our experience, we would have to learn how to do things in a very different way.
Is that something that ayahuasca can help us with? I have heard that ayahuasca can help to rewire the brain in just one session. Is that true?
It can, and the important thing to remember is that if you're willing to believe that change is possible, then yeah, you can get a lot of work done in a very short amount of time. If you go in and you're still committed to your old thought patterns, if you're committed to your old emotional go-to places, then yeah, we can have those neurosynaptic bridges disconnected, and then we can knit them right back up together just the way they were before, and we won't have really accomplished much of anything. The opportunity for that neurological disruption is to project something different onto that program so that it can change. Um, I'm reminded, since we're talking about scriptures, I'm reminded of turning water into wine. Which if you looked at that stories any other way than symbolically, you'd think that this was a magician doing a party trick at a wedding, and it's whereas bread represents all the things that are necessary to live in life. They're the things that keep you alive. Wine is all the good stuff. Wine represents all the things that make life worth living. It represents your personal preferences. And so if you're going through life not experiencing the good stuff, not experiencing the joy of your preferences, um, then you could say that your water's a little muddy. Um, and it takes clean, clear water. This is the purpose of meditation, is to sit in the silence and to practice being still long enough to let the perturbations of the mind settle, to let that those muddy waters of the mind settle, so that everything becomes clear and you see things as they are. And that's what water represents, is unconditioned consciousness. And that's what happens when you sit in the silence and you let all your cultural conditioning fall away, all your personal programming fall away, and you're left with infinite potentiality. And then you project your values onto that. You project your preferences. You project this is what I choose to experience. This is what I have faith in. This is what I say yes to. This is what I agree to. We talked about fear earlier. And the energy of fear is the same energy of faith. Fear and faith are the same thing. They're facing opposite directions. But both of them, both fear and faith, have to do with your expectations about what's gonna happen next. And you will experience whatever you're agreed to, um, probably subconsciously. Nobody ever just, wakes up and starts experiencing what they want. Most people experience their current level of fear, and they don't know how not to. And this is how we do it. This is how we understand. This is how we move past our fears. Is we're not trying to get rid of fear. Only psychopaths have no fear. There's always a healthy dose of fear. You want to make sure that you jump when you see a train coming down the tracks. Um, But there's two habits that we have, two things that we participate in, that we create as habits, and we've done them so long now we think they're personality traits, and that's worry and doubt. And worry and doubt are the two things that create conditions of fear. And the two things that we could do instead that would create conditions of faith that would counter that worry and doubt are to practice courage and what's the and perseverance. Courage and perseverance are the habits, they're the activities that we participate in that would create conditions of faith. Because there's consequences for fear and there's consequences for faith. There's consequences for worry and doubt, and there are consequences for courage and perseverance. And the thing is about practicing the faith is that you only see the results of it after you've practiced it. Just like you only see a change in your reflection in the mirror after you've changed your expression. If you're waiting for the mirror to rescue you or show you something different before you're ready to show it first, that is the path to frustration and disappointment. And one of the practices that I did that helped me change my perspective on life was to look at everything in the material world, everything that in your physical environment, and look at everything that you're surrounded by as if you're looking into a mirror 100% of the time, and realize that what the material world is showing you is a reflection of your own subconscious. And when you change what's going on in your subconscious, it changes what you project and it changes what you experience in life. And when I found that out, I wanted it. I wouldn't let anyone or anything get in my way. I had to understand that. And now one of the things I remind myself is that I don't even want to hold a thought. I don't want to contemplate anything that I don't really want to be true. And everything that I used to complain about, everything that I used to disapprove of, I still complain about and I still disapprove of it, but I don't entertain that because a thought's just a thought until you dwell on it. And then it becomes your life.
How did you come to that knowledge and your ability to be able to change it?
The words that I learned, they're from people who've come before us. Even in modern times, there are there's a lot of teachers who understand how the mind works, who understand what we're working with, understand how to change your mind, and they've all used kind of different language to share this with people, and so what I've noticed is that instead of trying to identify the phenomena and understand how it works, the people who have been dismissive of those ideas, I've realized um, they're hardcore materialists. Um, and I don't mean that in the sense of being materialistic, like, got to have the latest golden iPhone or whatever. I don't mean that. I just mean that they don't believe in non-causal events. Um, they believe in the world of um, billiard balls and bowling balls and cannonballs and gravity, and that this is the really real world, and then this is the way the world works. But then quantum physicists, we named the smallest unit of matter that we could imagine. We called it an atom, and atom means indivisible. What did we do? We went and broke it, and so now we say that atoms are made up of these subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and they're not solid. They don't have they're not matter as we would call matter. It's attractive, repulsive forces that are full of mostly empty space. And if we break those parts down to smaller quarks and neutrinos, and there's no such thing as solid matter. Everything is in a state of flux, everything is vibrating, and everything is made up of vibrational energy. And of course, that's what Einstein said, is that matter and energy are essentially the same thing in different states. But Einstein was looking for a regular universe, and that's not what the math added up to. I think he said there was too much gravity. So now we have to make up this dark matter or whatever to make up for the gravity, and that entanglement was the spooky quality of the universe. That you split a photon, you poke half of it over here, and the other half reacts. That it should not happen, should not be possible. Yeah, here we are.
I love that science is starting to acknowledge more spiritual experiences. There's some research on near death experiences, and quantum physics is just pretty mind blowing as well.
It will probably be less than 50 years, but more than 5. But at some point, science and religion are gonna become the same thing. It's probably gonna happen sooner rather than later. There's a lot of holdouts on both sides. There's a lot of bad history between the two. But I'm reminded again of, bring up Marvel comic movies, but in Thor, the first Thor movie said, where you guys here, you call one thing science and one thing magic, and where I come from, they're the same thing.
I could sit here and talk to you all day. You have so much wisdom and so many experiences. I just want to ask you, because I can't talk to you all day, if you have any last words of wisdom for my viewers.
Well, what I kind of didn't get around to saying, that was that I think there's an order of operations of how the mind and experience work, and it's like I said, of course, everything's happening at the same time, but there does seem to be an order of operation, to put it like a math formula. But cycle, it's not linear, it's a cycle, but it's really easy to forget where the order or the origin of the cycle began, because we're in our very beginning, we're not doing much mentally. We're very much receiving when we're very young. And so life happens, and we experience that life. And but the first thing we do is that we have beliefs about ourselves, even before we have language to describe it. We have beliefs about ourselves. And so those are the beliefs that we unconsciously internalize. And those beliefs are very emotional. So the beliefs that we internalize about ourselves, I'm helpless, I'm powerless, my value is dependent on external validation. and nothing I ever do will ever be enough. Those are the types of things that we can internalize as infants, and we have no language to describe that. And so, of course, as adults, we would deny this and no, I don't believe any of that. Really, why all the self sabotage in your work, in your relationships, in your hobbies? Why is it so difficult to follow through? Well, all these circumstances, and well, how did those circumstances get there? We accidentally believed things about ourselves that aren't true. And it led to how we feel, and our emotions lead directly to our behavior. Our behavior leads to our experience of life, and our experience of life determines the meaning that we project onto it. So, those five things: beliefs, emotions, behaviors, experience, and meaning, they happen in that order. And then, of course, the meaning that we project onto life circles right back around and informs the beliefs that we internalize about ourselves. And then the cycle continues. And so, we're trying to behavior our way out of, or into preferred experiences. And that's kind of like opening the door to change the temperature in the room, which works, for like 3 seconds, and then the thermostat kicks it back on, and then the temperature just goes right back up to the way it was before. And so when people are trying to monitor their emotions, try to regulate their emotions, they're mostly staring at the thermometer, trying to guess when their emotions are going to do this or that. They're trying to bully their own emotions into submission, but just keep opening a door, opening a window. It never occurs to them to find the thermostat, which is the beliefs that we have internalized about ourselves. And there's parts of ourselves that are rigidly held onto those beliefs because they helped us survive at one point earlier in our lives. It's just that those strategies may have worked when we were toddlers and they haven't worked since. And so we need to learn a radically different approach to speaking to ourselves and to those parts of our personality in ways that actually begin to fulfill those emotional needs. And it, if you change how you feel, if you change what you do, if you change your experience of life, if you change what it means, you change what life means to you, whether you're aware of it or not, it will be because you changed what you believe about yourself. And those core beliefs that everyone is struggling with to some degree. Am I wanted? Am I worthy? Can I do it? Am I loved? These are the issues that most people, to one degree or another, are struggling with. And consciously, they can say, "Yes, yes, I believe all of that." And then there's parts of our personality that show through our behavior that no, I absolutely do not. At least that part of me doesn't. And it's it's probably not going to change its mind. These parts of our personality, they're probably not going to change their mind until we give them a really good reason. And one of those really good reasons might be that you show them over and over again that your ability to experience emotions is safe. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to drive you crazy. You're not going to get lost in it. You're not going to be consumed by the emotions, even if those emotions are ugly, even if it's rage and terror and shame and sorrow, even if it's all that stuff. You're not going to get lost in it. In fact, the opposite. The experience of it is what allows you to process it. Because if you don't, it just hunts you down. It haunts you.
I know that it's taken you a long time, a lifetime, to come to where you're at right now and have gathered all this wisdom. And
Oh, especially some of the more trauma informed things. The Like Dr. Richard Schwartz. created the internal family systems model of trauma therapy. And somebody introduced us to that system. I've been looking for a long time for, show me something I don't know. And I was like, whoa, when I was introduced to that, I was like, I did not know this. We used to talk about, the ego defense mechanisms and things. And Dr. Schwartz, um, he spent a lot of time exploring, with people their their hidden subconscious voices and parts of their personality and giving them a voice. He developed um, a very effective method of understanding how the mind works, especially our relationship between our conscious and unconscious personality parts, and gave us a very elegant method of speaking to those parts. So, like I said before, if it wasn't for trauma, changing our bad habits would be, relatively simple process of understanding the relationship between your conscious and subconscious mind, and just, repeating something until your subconscious internalized it. But trauma causes things to get in the way, and so that process is not as obvious as it might be otherwise. And the process is still the same. It's just trauma makes it a little more complex.
And do you think trauma is actually there as a tool as well? If we didn't experience trauma, would we have the motivation to want to be better?
People don't want to hear this. Nobody wants to hear. People think that when people say things like, I am, where I am because of my traumas, they think that that means they're giving the traumas the credit. And that doesn't make any sense. No, it of course, people overcome things because they had something to overcome. They learned something because there was an ignorance there. They grew because there was a painful misunderstanding there that eventually became understood. And you can't come to those kinds of understandings without the experiences. So I know people don't want to hear this, but yeah, if I've learned anything it's about myself, it's because of my traumas, not in spite of them. It gave me something to work with. It gave it gave me um, you know something to create a frame of reference with, which just would never happen if all we had were soft and pleasant experiences. We're also generally um, we think that because we're in a particular state, that means that we have to accuse ourselves of being in that particular state. It's like if we're in a state of ignorance, it's like we have to blame ourselves that we've done something wrong to be in that state of ignorance. No, we started at a game not knowing that we were playing a game. That's how the game had to be played. The game wouldn't have been. It's like you can't play poker with all the cards face up. And the game being played having most of the cards face down is not an insult or injury to you. That's how the game's played. So just because you're born and nobody gave you the rule book, I know it seems viciously unfair, but that was how the game had to start. You had to be able to experience pain and confusion. And in the beginning, you had to be able to confuse pain with injury. And that's how we start playing the game. And part of learning how to play the game is learning that that's not true. Learning that just because we've been hurt, that does not mean that we've been injured. Just because we've been hurt, that doesn't mean that we can't do any of the things that we could have done if we hadn't been hurt.
Do you know how to win the game?
I think I figured out how to play. I think I figured out a lot of the rules to play in the game. And gosh, just waking up and realizing that you're playing a game is the hardest thing in the beginning. I was insulted. I was like, how dare you? It was offensive to me in the beginning. The idea that life is a game, because how dare you take my pains and my troubles and my traumas and say that this is supposed to be fun? Well, it's supposed to get fun. It's not supposed to start fun. Do you remember when you were young and you saw the big kids playing a game, and they were having fun, they were laughing, and you wanted to be a part of that, right? Of course. And so you go up to the big kids and you say, "Let me play." And they were like, "No, you're too young. You don't know how to play. This isn't going to be fun. You're going to cry." You're like, "No, I won't. I'll have a good time. I'll just do whatever you tell me." And you get in there and you get your ass handed to you. And it's not fun. And you cry and you're like, "Oh, this game was supposed to be fun and it wasn't. And they were right." And then after some time, you and some experience, you start learning the rules to the game, which just becomes very different than when you first tried. And after a while of learning the rules to the game and playing the game, and developing some skills and some experience and some perspective, and then the game starts to be fun. It's challenging at first, and then you start to have fun with it. And then after a while, you might realize whether it's fun or not, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether things are obvious or confusing, it's meaningful. It was meaningful because you decided what that meaning was going to be. You decided that you were going to embrace a purpose. You decided that you were going to embrace an identity. And part of creating that new identity means the old identity had to die.
If my viewers wanted to reach out to you, if they have more questions, or maybe they have questions about ayahuasca or Peaceful Mountain Way, how can they reach you?
You can always send me an email at it's ayapmwinfo@gmail.com. So that's AYAPMW for Peaceful Mountain Way, INFO at gmail.com. And you can also check out our website at peacefulmountainway.org. And that explains what we do, what our process is, how we accept and welcome new members, how our new membership process, how we schedule and conduct ceremonies. And I understand there's a lot of information there, and we even sit down right before we get started, and we go over all the last protocols, and all the last preparations, and because sometimes the very last things that we hear are the things that we can actually remember during ceremonies. So there's we're unfolding a lot of new information, but we do try to unfold it in digestible bite-sized chunks. But I do, anyone who's considering membership, I like to have at least a brief phone consultation with everyone, because I like to, hear, what people's intentions are in their own words, what their expectations might be. And um, I like to hear people string together a few coherent sentences, and I can, talk about some of our perspectives, and we can make sure we're on the same page.
Thank you so much, Damian, for being my guest. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to have some of your time. And I wish the very best for you and everything. Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.